Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I want to show you guys a quick and easy way to check to see if your lens is back focusing or front focusing. I hate it whenever I search for a YouTube video that promises to show me the answer to a question, and then you've got to watch the person talk for 20 minutes about how to diagnose the problem when all you want is the solution to the problem. So I'm going to do this backwards. I'm going to start with how to actually do this, and then at the end of the video I'm going to talk about just different things relating to front focusing and back focusing. So this is the quick, easy, and dirty way to do it. You can download charts off the internet and you can buy little pieces of equipment to check this, but this is a quick, easy way that I was taught to check for front or back focusing, and this is the way I do it. So just get a handful of items. I prefer to get something that's exactly the same. I use batteries most of the time, but you can use soup cans or whatever. I turn them so that the little text on the battery is facing me, because text is really easy to check for sharpness. And just put them in a little diagonal line like that, just a little 45-degree slant. You are going to want to put your camera on a tripod if at all possible. If you don't have access to a tripod, at least put it on a table, something steady. You don't want to handhold for this. The reason why I'm doing this outside is because you want to use your lowest possible ISO. So ISO 100 in this particular case, because you want the cleanest images, because you're checking for critical sharpness. So low ISO and a tripod are pretty much a must. Now, as far as the distance that you set up away from what you're shooting, I prefer to be around the minimum focusing distance. I know a lot of people recommend 50 times the focal length and in centimeters. So like, if it's a 50mm lens times 50 would be 2,500 centimeters. I think it's like 5.9 feet, something like that. That's what a lot of people recommend, with the exception of telephoto lenses. They say if it's over 200mm, it should be 25 times the focal length, but I just usually go for the minimum focusing distance. Now, in this particular case, the reason why I'm doing this test is because I recently bought a Tamron 20-4-70, and we'll get into that more here in a little bit about zoom lenses versus prime lenses on this test. But I'm going to do this test at 3 different focal lengths to check to see if it's back focusing or front focusing. You want to make sure that you're in your one shot or single shot mode. You don't want to be in your continuous tracking or AI servo mode for Canon. Also, make sure that your vibration control or image stabilization is turned off. Set your camera to single point autofocus with the center point, because that's usually your most accurate focusing point, and aim for the center item. So I've got 5 batteries here. It's going to be the center one. So, and the only reason why I have it on a book, in case anybody's wondering, is even though this table looks nice and flat, it's got a soft surface and it's not exactly even, and so the batteries were wobbling and falling down. So basically I've got this all set up. So I'm just going to focus in on the center battery. Now I have it set on a 2-second delay timer, just to make sure that there's no camera shake involved. And so I just shot that at 70mm, and now I'm going to shoot it at 45mm and 24mm. So I had it on 2-second delay, so it just shot all 3 of those shots. And you're going to probably want to import them into your computer to check to see which one is sharpest. I don't know if I mentioned this or not. Make sure your vibration control is turned off on your camera. You don't want that on while you're on a tripod. One other thing I forgot to mention, make sure that you have your aperture set at the widest possible aperture. In this particular lens's case, it's f2.8. If you've got a 1.8 or a 1.4 lens, you want to be at 1.4, 1.8, whatever the widest aperture on your lens is, because if you're set at f4, f5.6, whatever, you're giving yourself a little bit of leeway in your depth of field. And the point is to check to make sure that this lens is focusing 100% accurately. So you want to make sure you've got an extremely shallow depth of field. So I'm going to import these into the computer, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so I've got all of the images imported into Lightroom, and we're going to take a look at them right now. But before we do that, I just wanted to clarify one thing. Whenever I was speaking earlier, I said that a lot of people recommend that you should have your camera 50 centimeters times the focal length away from what you're photographing. It's not centimeters, it's millimeters, and my math was a little off earlier. I said that it'd be about 6 feet. If it was a 50mm lens, it would be more like 8 feet 2 inches, somewhere around there. So Make sure you're multiplying in centimeters or in millimeters, because if you go centimeters, you're going to be at like 80 feet or something like that. So let's take a look at these images. Now, I actually went back and did this again because I actually thought that my results were a little wrong, and I'll show you guys why here in just a second. You can see here we're at 70 millimeters f2.8. I focused on the center battery, and it was the battery just behind it that is sharpest in focus. Not a big deal. Then we go to 46 millimeters, and I'm going to bring this in 3:1 because it's kind of far away. Okay, so here's our center battery, clearly not in focus. And on this one, we're at the last battery is the sharpest, but it's still not that sharp. Now at 24 millimeters, this is where the issue really became apparent, or became a real big problem. You can see here, none of these batteries are sharp. The closest, I guess the sharpest one would be the last battery, the furthest one to the back, but it's not sharp at all. So I thought that maybe I had messed up and had misfocused. So I went back and I did the test again. Here we are at 50 millimeters again. Let's go ahead and bring this out just a little bit. So at 50 millimeters again, it's the farthest battery to the back. And again, I focused on the center battery in every single test. Here we are at 70 millimeters, and again, the farthest battery to the back, but it's still not sharp. And here we are at 24 millimeters, and we're going to go 3:1, and the closest thing to being sharp is the last battery, but it is still very out of focus. So it's a big problem. Okay, so you can see that the lens had a serious problem with back focusing, and that's one of the problems with a zoom lens. That's the reason why a lot of people don't make any kind of adjustments when it comes to a zoom lens. For example, whenever you get a prime lens, especially something that goes like f1.4, f1.2, you should probably do this test right out of the box to make sure that it's focusing accurately, because each lens has a focusing tolerance. That's kind of the, whenever you mass produce anything, it's not going to be perfect. So I'm just picking arbitrary numbers here, but let's say that Canon has a plus or minus factor of 3, meaning that the lens can front focus +3 or back focus +3, and it's still within its acceptable ranges, and they'll ship it out. If you're shooting with an f2.8 lens or an f4 lens, you may never notice the difference. But if you then put it on a camera body that also has a tolerance of ±3 for front or back focusing, and let's say your lens is +3 and your camera body is +3, well, now you have a +6 issue. So it can really create a serious focusing issue, especially when you're using a very shallow depth of field. So most cameras, or especially your professional or higher end cameras, they give you the ability to make focus adjustments. So you can make the adjustment in with your camera body so that it will focus properly. Now the problem with the zoom lens is oftentimes with the zoom lens, it may back focus at, let's say, 24 millimeters, but it may be fine at 70 millimeters. In this particular lens's case, you can see that at the wider focal lengths, the back focusing issues were very severe, and I actually think that the lens actually just had some focusing issues in general. It was a refurbished lens that I bought off of Amazon, and I really struggled to get sharp images at 24 millimeters. In fact, I couldn't get tack sharp images, which was why I set up this test and tried it. But as I went through the focal range, once I got up to 70 millimeters, the back focusing issue wasn't as severe, and I was able to make some decent shots. And the way that I noticed this was when I first got the lens, I took it out, I used it, and I got home and I was disappointed because my images were not tack sharp. At first I thought maybe the lens just really isn't that sharp, and I actually blame myself, because most of the time it's not going to be a problem with your gear. Most of the time it's usually a problem with us as photographers. And what I had thought had happened was the first time I took it out, I was using very slow shutter speeds, and I thought maybe I just didn't hold the camera very steady. And I took it out again and I shot with it, and I had the same problem. And when I was going through the images, what I noticed was the eyes that I focused on were not tack sharp. The little boy that I was photographing, his ears were tack sharp. And so that made me realize there was an issue with, or possibly an issue with the lens back focusing. So I set up a test and I did the test. Now luckily for me, I purchased this through Amazon, so I shipped it back and I'm getting refunded my money on the lens. I don't want to blame Tamron because that was a Tamron 24-70. Like I said, it was a refurbished lens. I think things just weren't fixed properly by the repairing company or whoever did it. But anyways, typically what's going to happen, because I hear people say all the time, oh, my lens is back focusing, my lens is front focusing. And I'll be honest with you, I have handled a lot of lenses in my life and I haven't encountered a lot of lenses that are front or back focusing, not enough to notice anyways. So I think that typically the problem is going to be with the photographer, because it doesn't take much to miss your focus point. Just breathing in and out, your body moves, naturally we sway. I know we all think that we can stand perfectly still, but people move in general. And good shooting technique will help to minimize that, but when you're shooting with very shallow depths of field, it can be, you've really got to be aware of what you're doing. So this is a good test, this is a simple and easy test to check to see if your lens is in fact front or back focusing. Like I said, there are little charts that you can download on the internet and little kits that you can buy online to do this test. My problem is I'm very disorganized. You guys could probably tell from my desk, and I know what would happen for me is if I bought one of those things, I would put it in a drawer, and when I needed to test something, I would have no idea where it was. And so I learned how to do it the simple method, just using batteries or you know, macaroni and cheese boxes, anything that you can just stagger at a 45-degree angle, and it gives you the chance to check to see if if your lens is front or back focusing. And like I said, this was a good example, I think, of why it's difficult with zoom lenses. Most people don't recommend that if you have a zoom lens that's front or back focusing for you to make the adjustments in camera. Most people recommend that you send it back to the manufacturer, and I would agree with that. Unless your lens is consistently front or back focusing all throughout the focal range, it doesn't do you any good to make adjustments in camera. Because let's say the lens is shooting perfectly fine at 70 millimeters, but it's back focusing a 1/4 of an inch at 24 millimeters. Well, if you go in your camera's menu systems and you make the adjustment to compensate for the 24 millimeters, it's now going to be out of focus at 70 millimeters. So with zoom lenses, it's almost always better to send them in and have the issue fixed. So hopefully that helps you guys out. If you guys have any questions about front or back focusing lenses, or maybe if I wasn't clear on how to set up this incredibly simple test, leave me a comment below. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.